All right, people, what is going on? Today I have back with me Terry Baines, who many of you have known, come to become familiar with through our interactions discussing various things like the Democratic Party, the Democratic Leadership Council, like a lot of different things, basically giving historical context to a lot of the things that we have discussed and really kind of affects what we are seeing within not only the Democratic Party, but just political discourse today. And Terry had this really bright idea based off of a question that is actually a pretty damn legitimate one when you think about it. We're trying to figure out. So first, we're going to discuss when did liberal become such a bad word, what a liberal used to be, and how it is seemingly defined now. Uh, and because he considers himself a classical liberal. Now, I, as a progressive, I'm going to talk about what progressivism I believe used to be versus what I personally believe it has become. And the reason why we felt that discussion was actually necessary was because for some reason, not for some reason, I'm going to explain the reasons why, but Terry actually like is all over the place with the definition of progressive. And after the conversation that we had, he has every right to be. He has absolutely every right to be considering the way discourse has taken this weird turn. So, Terry, you consider yourself to be a classical liberal.
Yes.
Why? What is your definition of classical liberal? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, for everybody in the new independent media space and in this new political dialogue we've been having, everybody associates, unfortunately, classical liberal with Dave Rubin, who is basically a right wing hack. So gotta I got froze a little bit, but go ahead and let the crowd know why you consider yourself to be a classical liberal.
I just lost your screen, so I hope you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still
Uh,
here. I
okay.
can still, yeah, my camera just froze on me, but it's all good.
Okay, that's fine. I'm a liberal because it's easier. I really am. I wish I was joking, but it's just easier. There's too many rules. I don't know what AP uh, style book. I'll throw the link up when we get done. Doesn't says don't even use the term progressive because it couldn't define it. How do you use it? I can't define it. And I keep thinking all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt was a progressive. Uh, so I just there's it's simpler for a liberal. All I got to worry about is go back to liberal arts, like liberal arts degree,
Hmm.
and it stands for and I'm going to mess this up because I don't speak English that well, much less Latin. But arts liberales,
Hmm.
works worthy of free men, and that's it. That's all I have to try to remember to be a liberal. Um, every policy decision,
But
every
doesn't free men or work worthy of free men? That's very subjective, right? I consider liberal like the original definition of liberal is basically making sure you don't infringe upon someone else's freedom. Now, like, because that could be considered something different than works worthy of free men or actions worthy of free men,
I
right?
think the liberal arts is the education worthy of free men. So
Yeah. So liberal arts would be, yeah, the translation would be
so for
education.
liberal, just free. It's
Yeah.
just is this or from just is this a free is this are we coming at this from free or not? And I guess where it comes back down to it is well, is it is it a progressive platform right now that we have to go kill brown people for whatever reason? More bombing in Syria, in
Uh huh.
Venezuela, or
See,
to me, that's not free. I mean,
yeah.
I'm concerned with free.
And
Do these?
see, this is where things get a little murky. And this is why I said that Terry actually has every reason to have asked me and be confused as to what the hell progressive means. Because myself as a progressive, at least more so before this last year and a half or so, I would have considered that to be more along the lines of the modern day definition of liberal or neoliberal, but not a progressive, right? Because progressivism is supposed to be for progress. But see, therein lies the issue. Who is who is in charge of said progress or seeing said progress through, right? Who is the burden put on? Do you believe in self-determination, or do you believe in actually working to affect that change? And when you believe in the latter, it could get, once again, a little bit murky, because then you believe potentially that you have the best idea. You know what's better, it's best for a people or a group, and you begin to take the people's autonomy out of it. And that's why I felt like it was a good question, or a good discussion to have. So here, I'll give you my progressive. My definition of progressive has always been, moving towards progress. The definition that I know liberal used to be was, basically what you said, or classical liberal. Is actions worthy of free men, education worthy of free men. For example, healthcare is technically liberal, right? We still live in this age, which is funny. I think I was listening to a speech from like FDR, which is crazy. It was like a while ago though, but it was in black and white, and they were like, "Why is the UK's healthcare so much better than ours?" And I was like, "Huh? Are you kidding me? That was 70 years ago, and we're still," because, well, the UK did tend to be a little bit more educated, right? They did have more access to all the things that you would say are worthy of free men. And then for those of you who don't know, and Terry and I were discussing this, the other day, the philosophy of this is, so when you're talking about liberal arts and free men, that is not like a constant. You should understand the context of that is somewhat literal. When North Carolina A&T, which most of you all know as, the most storied HBCU outside of maybe Howard, it's stands for North Carolina Agriculture and Technical School. Agriculture and Technical School was by definition not for, free white men, right? If we're being blunt. It was, however, for slaves, former slaves, women who couldn't, well, actually, I don't think black women could go at that point. Basically people who were not free, did not have all the freedoms afforded to them in society that their free, white, educated counterparts could get, right? You weren't going to North Carolina A&T at the time when it was first created to learn how to play the violin, to learn how to be a politician, for public speaking, to go to law school eventually. All these things have been associated with the Northeast, which is why people always associate quote unquote liberalism with the Northeast. So even though I understand, so like when we're talking about literal liberalism, by definition, I probably am more liberal, quote unquote. But then we have to talk about the actual implications of what being called a liberal is in today's society. And then Terry's going to talk about why he believes that we actually need to change that connotation. If you say that you're a liberal now, nowadays it is taken as you're a neoliberal, which is why I try to make sure to make that distinction. I usually don't call people liberal. I say if it's a neoliberal, I say neoliberal. There, somebody like, for example, I guess the closest. Funny enough, we were just talking about this. The closest I think we have right now to a true liberal is Tulsi, right?
Yes.
And I think that's why she freaks people out, right?
Yes.
Very hands off.
Yes.
Don't get involved. I can not like what's going on. It might not be my personal taste, but that doesn't mean I need to get involved, because she believes in the self-determination of people, right? And if you believe in the self-determination of people, that means you probably consider those people deserve at least to be free, and believing in their self-determination is worthy of quote unquote free men, right? If they wish to be free, then they must be able to partake in actions with autonomy without,
Perfect.
you know what I'm saying? Like, and if they choose to be aided, then that's a whole different discussion that you can have in a different day. So when you're looking at Syria, for example, unfortunately, this is where Terry has a point when you're talking about progressivism. we have candidates, politicians, whether it be for Syria, whether it be, we can even talk about India. I know a lot of people like talking about India now all of a sudden because Tulsi's running and she's Hindu. Not totally not bigoted at all, by the way. But they want us to get involved. They want us to condemn leaders. They want us to say, even if they were guilty, even if they were guilty of something, they want us to condemn, they want us to punish, and then they want us to try and sway that leadership or that government or the people in that region and their allies or enemies in one way or another without request, most often times, right? That is not liberalism. However, unfortunately, we have progressives who seem to be okay with this. That is where I think the issues come in, right? They believe, they truly in their heart believe, for example, you cannot have progress in Syria until you remove Assad. And I'm willing to do as a progressive whatever I need to do in order to make that happen, because that's how they define progress. Unfortunately, Bernie Sanders introduced a legislation in 2011 that led to Gaddafi being overthrown. Now, here's what's ironic about that. Bernie obviously considers himself a progressive. He believed truly in his heart that there could not be progress in Libya without removing Gaddafi, which, I mean, it progressed into something, it progressed into slavery, literally. So yes. I think by definition, I think we can all agree that's not worthy of free men. That actually
yes.
is not worthy of free men.
Very good. Yes. But, slave marts back again in the 21st century.
So how do you, I mean, am I in the right ballpark? Is that's why you're kind of confused about progressivism, because you hear somebody like me who's extremely anti-war, extremely quote unquote libertarian-esque when it comes to war, other people's economies, et cetera, et cetera. Even when it comes to, we talk about guns and gun rights, and that might be a function of education more than anything, because we're educated on the rights of guns. But I'm very much so more libertarian in a lot of ways, but for you, you're like, it's just actually just plain liberal from your generation day.
It goes back to, this sounds like a meme, but I'm old enough to remember there used to be liberal Democrats and liberal Republicans. There was common ground between the two parties. That has changed in my lifetime. Basically, the first time I got
still common ground. They're both perfectly fine with overthrowing government. So let me be clear about it.
It doesn't sound like it to me. It's like
that's about the only common ground they have. Actually, is the willingness to overthrow government. That's basically it.
Well, yeah, yes. Where we were just talking about, there seems to be common ground that, well, we'll take care of the Syrians' oil for them because we can do a better job of that than they are, is what both the Republican who's the president and the people that are for change almost working with the Constitution funding that war. Because, see, that goes way back as a liberal power of the purse string. Your job as a congressman is to turn that money off. It's been done before. Boland Amendment. Yeah, that goes all the way back to Magna Carta. That goes back to a bunch of guys with the funny looking outfits standing under a tree. I mean, this goes way, way, way back. That's liberal. And that's the other part that's really confusing for people who aren't used to what classical liberal is it's the economics sounds like libertarian because that's where they came from. The libertarian people have come from classical liberalism, but they're ignoring Tom Paine. We won't pay attention to those nasty rights of men. And
that's what I was going to say, because so for example, this is why it's important to kind of like, we have to kind of analyze the discourse based off of what unfortunately is the current how people view these titles. For example, Dave Rubin, unfortunately, calls himself a classical liberal, and he basically sounds like once again a modern day version of what we know to be as a libertarian. The issue is what you just said. Damn those rights of people. Nothing is guaranteed except for, which is ironic because doesn't I feel like the Constitution guarantees actually rights, which is funny. Right?
To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's what a liberal believes, a classical liberal. You really do have to know that little piece from the Declaration because that's where the Constitution comes from. And what they're talking about is natural rights of men, which sounds like that's been poo-pooed as well. That's a bunch of old white rich dudes. Well, it is, other than there's the Iroquois Constitution that all the way back to, I got to look at notes here, 1100 something.
Yeah, they had a government, a functioning government for long before the U.S. even got, or excuse me, not the U.S., the white man, the European.
1142, I think,
Yeah.
was the Iroquois Confederation Constitution. Excuse me, and again, it's not just a democracy, which is people choosing, but a republic is when there's a constitution. That well, I'd like to do that, but the law says I can't, and there's a good reason for that. Go ahead.
So somebody in the group chat actually asked a pretty good question, or they were suggesting an inquiry anyway. It says that Andrew Yang seems progressive, and the reason why is because of universal basic income. Now, here's what I'm going to do, which I haven't actually done, I think, ever, just because I haven't had a chance to, is actually explain to people why Yang people feel like they have every right to call Andrew Yang a quote unquote progressive. So if we're going to say we've come to model our standard of progressivism by whatever Bernie Sanders says or does, that's just become the norm. Shouldn't be that way, but that's how it is. Now, even if you want
is that personality politics, by the way?
It's
cult of personality
politics, somewhat legacy politics, because his personality didn't really attract people in the beginning. It was literally his policies, and then it became his personality because they grew to trust him over time. So like it's half and half at this point, I would say. And I think there's a survival instinct kicking in for people as well. So with progressivism, people basically model it after Bernie Sanders. Now, the Yang has the UBI, which is a guaranteed basic income, because of the reality of automation. Okay, cool. And that's actually considered a quote unquote leftist or socialist policy. And then Bernie wants federal jobs guarantee, which I would agree is quote unquote libertarian, right? If you want to be able to work, then that right should not be taken away from you, especially if we have all this crumbling infrastructure and all this shit to do around the country. So he checks the box there. Now let's go to foreign policy. Bernie is horrid on Russiagate. So is Yang. Bernie is bad on China. So is Yang. Bernie places a lot of faith in institutions, the same institutions that Yang places faith in. They both don't like disastrous trade deals. However, their actions sometimes kind of, you're like, okay, you don't trust these institutions from these countries, but then when these countries make up lies about other countries, you believe everything they say about them for the most part. They're both good on Iran, but they were both basically bad on Afghanistan. They're both good on immigration. Yang, he's not as good as I like him to be. He's kind of murky there, but I do believe that he's just one of those. He's very libertarian when it comes to immigration. I do believe that. And so if we're going to use Bernie Sanders, but he's not. So here's the thing: he's not good on Medicare for all or universal health care. Yang isn't. So that's like a notch, but that's like one notch. And progressivism isn't a zero sum game like any other type of label. So when somebody says, well, Andrew Yang isn't progressive, then this is where I have a gripe. I wouldn't personally call Andrew Yang progressive, but that's by my definition of progressive. But a lot of people would be upset at the people I would say aren't progressive based off of my definition of progressive. But the reality of the situation is, the perception is, they feel like they have every single right to call Andrew Yang a progressive, because if you can only separate by one policy or two policies, but the general concepts are the same, and then they're both almost equal on foreign policy. So if Bernie's equal to Yang on foreign policy, and they basically almost have all the same policies, slight adjustments, but with similar philosophies. How in Yang supporters' mind, they have every right to suggest that Yang is a progressive, and it's hard to debate that. You know
Yes.
what I'm saying? Like it's very. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. And again, that's why, thank God, I'm a liberal. There's too many rules. I can't remember all the rules and all of the different permutations. I want to go back to a simple rule, which is free or not. When we were talking about liberal arts education, there were two educations: one for free men, one for slaves. Um, so
That's
we're
true. No, no,
we,
it's not liberal. It wasn't liberal arts. Remember, it wasn't called liberal arts. It was literally it was a vocational school.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
that would be
learning this
what this.
one thing. It was learning
Yes,
this one thing, uh, and that's it. Not
but you
none other
didn't
things.
learn rhetoric, which is where you learn to say, hold it, that's fake news, that's a red herring, that's all of the different logical fallacies that we should already know all of this. When we hear somebody take off on a uh, red herring we'd know all of the rhetorical tricks, so we
Yeah,
just automatically, it's not going to work. So
yeah.
that would be the people who weren't trained just for trade. Those are people who are trained for run the government. And
So
then for
now
us, that's all of us,
I have
by
a
the way.
question for you too. So since we're on the subject of Yang and UBI,
And we got to get back to the economics here,
do
by the
you
way.
do you believe that that UBI is liberal, quote unquote, worthy of free men?
It's not classical liberal at all, other
And why do you
than
feel like that?
where it comes back in is the Tom Paine side to me. There are people dying
Hmm.
because they don't have enough to eat or enough to get their medicine today. They're having to split their medications. Let's cut Social Security. That's neoliberal. That was the whole purpose of the neoliberals, was cut the budget, cut the budget, cut the budget,
Yeah.
privatize.
So why
Um,
can't you? So why can't we do both? That would be. I mean,
that's
like, why
that's
can't we
where I'm
keep Social
at.
Security
That's
and
that's the simple rule for me, because hey, is it worthy of free man? Hey, temporarily, do we put a platform in here because we're in the worst depression since the 30s,
yeah,
at
people have no
least.
idea. Yeah, when you basically
Yep.
cannot survive in any major city or even semi-major city without a roommate,
Right.
unless you're upper middle class,
Yes.
that's we're in a depression for sure.
And easy.
Um,
And the next step from there was we already touched on right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Are those the only rights that I know for sure people have, endowed by their creator, not by
really quick though. So why do you? Because you said that it's not classical liberalism. That's what you. So you say UBI isn't classical.
not because of the economic side of it. It wouldn't be the pure classical uh,
Hmm.
economics of. I'm not worried about the rule book. I'm worried about keeping people alive, because of the
But
Tom
that's why
Paine
I would
side of it.
consider
It's
it liberal,
both.
though. I guess that's
Yes,
why I would consider it
it
liberal.
is both. It's liberal economics, but I'm not going to get so locked down on that. I'm not wild about having to have Medicare for all. I do
Yeah,
consider
we
that
talked
to
about
be.
that.
Yes, I really think, oh, great, the government's going to fix this. Boy, are we messed up if we're down to, we got to count on the government to fix it. But right now, I believe the economics of it, which is the cheapest way to fix this mess, which is a
Yeah.
bunch of crooks,
See, and
is
that's an honest conversation, and that's a funny. That's a conversation I had with Sagar, who's actually conservative, right? He's like, "Bro, I'm not really into the government," which is funny because this is as a progressive, I would say that the majority of progressives don't trust the government either, right? So you have actual
okay. Now that I
liberals.
wasn't aware of, so
Yeah, the
that's
majority
interesting
of
too.
progressives don't. So the modern definition of liberal and or what we would call neoliberal, they love the government. They love the CIA. My friend Garland Nixon complains about it all the time. He's like he's maybe 10 years younger than you, but in that same generation generally. And he's like, I just cannot believe that the left is kissing the CIA's ass now. Like, when the hell did that start? And the left is the one who's Russia phobic, when they were the ones who
Yeah,
were saying leave Russia alone.
that's completely
It's
uh,
backwards. It's ass backwards. So
yes. And
I
again,
mean,
that's what's making Tulsi look completely unrecognizable if you can't work your way out of, if you don't know what liberal is, classical liberal is, you can't get a handle on how many times we've seen, well, she's not Democrat, or she is a
oh,
Republican,
hey,
or she,
can you turn down your microphone a little bit?
uh, yeah, I'll have to pull it back out a little. I can't really do anything. I've got such an antique, I can't do anything except just
Oh,
try to
okay.
get away from it. I think I got excited and
No, you're good. I
talk
just want
louder.
to yeah, just because I don't want them to have it.
So sorry about that.
No, you're good.
She's basically coming across as it's the liberal side of her. She's not letting rules get in the way of doing what needs to be done to get us out of this mess.
Exactly, and that's why when we talk about Medicare for all, and really any policy, I think that you have to ask, okay, where are they coming from? Like, is this from a genuine place? Like you said, you don't really trust the government. Like, it sucks that we have to go to this point, but at the same time, like most things in life, it isn't a zero sum game, because I don't trust the government, but I damn sure don't trust Aetna more than I trust the government. So
for sure. And there's no way to control Aetna unless it's with the power of all of us being able to say, no, you cannot do that, and we will make it stick.
We do have mechanisms in place to control the government, and then you can point to faces, to names, whoever the Secretary of Health. I think almost every, like, I know Tulsi single payer plus plan has some type of mechanism where there'll be a name that you can actually hold accountable. Same thing with Bernie's plan and Jayapal's plan. So all these single payer plans, and this is important for me, right? I need to know who's going to be held accountable, because when your name is on the dotted line and you can't get convoluted and and lose the authority, quote unquote, through, well, sorry, I'm just one vote. Sorry, I'm just one. Like you're much more likely to do the right thing. Not a guarantee, but you're much more likely, and especially if it's an elected position. So that's one of the reasons why it's like, okay, well, shit, I don't really trust the government all that much, which is an honest conversation that should be had.
Yes.
If you trust the government, then you haven't been paying attention. But also at the same time, I know that private corporations are the ones. They're the reason, really, that I don't trust the government that much. If we, lobbying and things like that. So I'm not going to put my trust in the reason that I don't trust the government all that much. So, I think that most honest people having honest conversations, I believe, think like that, right? Because like you said, there are even conservative liberals, and I would consider Sagar, for the most part, except for when it comes to weed, because that's a really weird thing of his. But for the most part, Sagar is liberal when it comes to economics, which and you're the same way, and I'm a progressive, and I'm liberal when it comes to a lot of economics as well. But I do believe that people should step in whenever it's time to whenever rights are being infringed upon. And
to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That is natural law. It's also in that Iroquois Constitution, just worded different. And I'm just now trying to I just found a copy of it, so I'm trying to read it. It's interesting. It's very interesting. If we don't have a budget to work with, because we're spending how many trillion in Afghanistan that we're still losing, and just losing more today. What's the military budget on the war on terror that we've blown?
Oh man!
What is the
trillion, 7 or 8 trillion or more?
And as a guy from Occupy, before we forget it, no, Warren didn't create Occupy. By the way, that's another one of those. There was that 2008 bailout. Yeah. That little pesky. That's we can't even find a number for how much money got peed into that system. Okay, and that isn't capitalist. Don't blame capitalism for that. There is nothing capitalistic about, okay, well, you made a really bad choice, so we're going to have all of these people who didn't make those bad choices pay for it. So that ain't capitalism.
So then you have to get into the philosophical discussion of capitalism, which basically asks, when has capitalism not, like, truly not been that? The moment that capitalism was finally able to fully develop, there were literally 4 people that ran everything. 4 companies that ran. So
on one cycle of history, I could see how you would think that. And I think part of that is you're basically a poli-sci background, and I'm basically a history. So I'm looking at a different time reference. But I'm thinking of Silk Road right now. The Silk Road, not the new Silk Road from China to, Marco Polo, Silk Road, trade. Trade has always been what makes, when trade breaks down, you're in a dark age. That's what happened at that Silk Road opened up, got another, because I can't.
Would they have considered that capitalism though? Because
No, it's a precursor to, before you even get to there, you have to have trade. And then before that, the next level of trade from there is, well, we'll have the British East India Company go out there and go into India and go get those spices that we want. And that's a system called mercantilism. Okay.
Yeah.
We're still not to capitalism. Capitalism comes after that.
A lot of people would call that capitalism, though.
Well, I understand that, because as a history teacher, I didn't do a very good job teaching people history, evidently. But that's not what happened. The bottom line here is that we're going to have honest conversations about there really is. Let's take a look at how capitalism develops. Mm-hmm. And then what we're in right now isn't capitalism. If you go with somebody who's a historian, economic historian, like Anthony Sutton, that we've talked about.
What society do you feel has gotten closest to the capitalism that you would most likely associate with liberalism?
Let me take it from the opposite first. If you want to see what the world is like without trade, which is a precursor to capitalism, then Dark Age. That you have no.
Well, yeah, but I think that's pretty much, because nobody really argues that capitalism is like in and of itself isn't necessary, because even Marx argues like the last step to socialism, or excuse me, the step before socialism is capitalism. And that's because capitalism creates so much excess by its very, like, it's just inherently, it just creates excess from what we've known.
What's wrong with that?
Well, then there's just,
as a worthy of free man
is the waste. The waste is not worthy of free men. When you
so if it's wasted, then it's not the whole concept between capitalism. It's supposed to be the markets are supposed to allocate it and all of that.
See that, but that is never what happens. That's what I'm saying. So we can't, when as far as what we know today, all throughout history, capitalism has led to waste, and then it didn't decrease and then reallocate itself. It became more wasteful. And then people started hoarding. So
I'm with you. I'm with you to hear. Other than, so what is a better system? Anybody?
I think we have to have a mixed system.
We do, and basically, and that is back to a truthful discussion. That I'm going to be on. Bernie Sanders is a socialist, and he will be
Democratic socialist, actual socialist.
I was going to take it to the paycheck. I bet he cashes his Social Security check, right? And I bet you.
I don't think he does, actually.
If anybody wouldn't, it would be him. So, but let's say for the normal people, probably cash that check. How about all of those guys with their highfalutin sounding purist socialism bad? I bet they cash their Social Security check, because they're all a bunch of white dudes. I don't see them not.
Ben Shapiro gonna cash every single one of them Social Security checks.
That's okay. So at that point, when it comes back down to individually, what is this person going to do? They don't vote no to socialism when it's to them.
Oh yeah,
and we didn't see a big vote no to socialism when it was to the rich bankers that we bailed out, and that's not capitalism. You do not bail out
on Medicaid, for example. Because maybe they couldn't afford health insurance. Because maybe they could afford it, as their life went on and they grew their careers. But when their child was born, they were still in college or building up their career, and their child was on Medicaid, and they had no problem with socialism then, huh? Crazy.
It's we're back to truthful discussions, and the other part of it is, part of this truthful discussion is people are going to have to come to grips with, you've been taught a bunch of crap, people.
Moral of the story, everybody. That's the one takeaway from the whole conversation.
So we need to uncrap this, and again, what we're having problems with is a frame of reference to even be able to deal with it. So let's bring it back to, I'm a liberal because it's easier. All I got to worry about, is it free or not? Is it more free? I said that wrong.
Yeah, more free,
let's not the absolute free. Capitalism isn't, perfect capitalism, and communism isn't perfect communism. It's always going to be some kind of a mixture of the two.
Always.
Morodes.
And people will call it one thing and just be to co-opt, which is the point of us having this conversation, right?
Did we ever get around to just how it became a dirty word? Because I found that fascinating. How did we make liberal a dirty word?
Funny enough, I would imagine it started around the time of DLC, whenever you and one of the segments that you and I did, but not necessarily. It didn't become dirty at that point. However, the people who created the Democratic Leadership Council after they got bought off by the Koch brothers, they considered themselves to be liberal, and then all the mistakes that they made turned off people like myself, and we separate ourselves. Right? I'm not one of those crazy liberals. I'm a progressive. I might be a leftist. You can call me that. But like you said, you can be liberal left, you can be liberal right. That's what I would consider. Probably libertarians, at least of old, would have considered themselves.
Libertarians, right. Another group that was changed out from Koch money.
Yeah, it was.
They went in and changed what libertarian meant back in '72.
We fast forward. We got to fast forward now to 2016. As the limelight is finally on those who call themselves liberal, because we're at kind of like this weird turning point in the country where everything is kind of being flipped upside down. And sometimes I just pull myself out of the conversation altogether. I'm just like, I'm a populist. But once basically the Hillary Clinton wing of the Democratic Party became dominant and Democrats primarily called themselves liberal, literally no one wanted to be a part of it. And so when the conversation changes like that in the public eye on such a grand level, like a grand scale, it's very hard to then tell somebody like maybe who's my age, a little bit younger, no, this is what liberal actually means. They're gonna look at you like, okay, that might be what you thought it meant, but this is what it actually means in our general discourse. This is what it means colloquially. So then it gets back to, because this is one of the things that you talk about when you learn a you discuss when you're learning languages. It's about how it's communicated, how it's received when it's communicated. And sometimes it's very difficult to just go backwards. You know what I'm saying? So
I'm a historian. I do everything backwards.
So I'll say about in the last 5 years, it became a quote unquote bad word because obviously conservatives do not trust anyone. They'll trust a progressive before they'll trust a liberal. How
about bleeding heart liberal? That was the one who brought me in here.
Now they believe that if you're a bleeding heart liberal, you're a hardcore Democrat. That's generally how it's received now.
So I'm going to kick up a link where bleeding heart, because I actually had to look it up. Okay, I've been hassled my entire life for being a liberal for one way or another. I've been kicked out of my party over and over and over again. I was there when the Clintons took over. That was a personal story. I was a Indiana delegate that really kind of had a small microcosm version of what happened in 2016 when they did it on the national level. And this is their MO. We've all got to pull together as long as it's good for them.
So your experience with them is almost like a metaphor for what
they're not liberal.
The entire definition, which is they're like, nah, this isn't your party anymore, liberal. We're going to co-opt your infrastructure, co-opt your message, claim to be what you are, and completely replace you. That's basically what took place. And of course, people bought it for quite some time. And when people woke up to all the other bullshit, they also woke up to the fact that these people are not actual left. Like literally, Hillary Clinton's probably a conservative in any other country. No, not probably. She's a conservative in this fucking country. But you know what I'm saying? Like, so it started probably around the time that you had your experience, and now it's finally
I've got a problem with her being anything other than for her. I don't think there's philosophy involved here other than the philosophy of.
You're right.
Yes, I really, and I think people are, it's
but
like.
She's even socially conservative though. That's different. Like so that's.
She didn't start that way. She started out as
She campaigned as a Goldwater girl.
Okay. Yes, that's true. Well, how about when was she on Watergate when she took out Nixon? Because that ain't exactly conservative. I thought she was a lawyer she was a lawyer for.
But you got to remember, her whole family was Republican and she was conservative. And then it took like Bill Clinton and her getting married for her to finally claim Democrat. And I think that even that was only because
I'm a little sensitive on this because they kicked me out of my party. It was like
they brought in the Hillarys and kicked you out, dog. That's messed up.
Well, it's I think she probably wasn't aiming directly at me, but I just kind of got the back splatter when it went off.
Oh no, they meant you. I mean, they may have not named you by name, but trust me, They wanted people like
Yes,
you specifically.
because somebody who was thinking in terms of worthy of free men instead of what's worthy of their party, DNC, is at that point she hadn't made the takeover. She's more worried about DNC than DLC. Did I get that
Yeah,
backwards? I got that backwards.
she said
DLC is
DLC
her
and the DNC.
takeover.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of
and
like the Venezuela thing where we'll just put a rump government together. We'll say that's the real one, and you're
we'll
not
stream
allowed
it
to say
on
that's not.
YouTube. We'll stream it on
Bingo.
YouTube.
Yes. And is that what free men would allow? Not
No.
even.
And matter of
Uh,
fact, if the Democratic Party was truly democratic, they would have never allowed themselves to be a quote unquote private corporation. Now, if you have to operate in a certain sense, just because you got to have a way of tracking you, that's different. And there are actually more ethical ways to go about doing that.
that's a good one that needs to be opened up because the party isn't candidates aren't there for the good of the party. The party
So the
is
Dems
there.
are.
That's what I'm trying to say here is this is another thing that's got completely 180 degrees out. When I sent you the loyalty oath, quote unquote, that did Bernie really sign this loyalty oath saying he was
Yeah,
going to, that ain't the way this works. The
I
way
know.
this, and again, it's because I'm an old fart with white hair, but I can remember, I'm old enough to remember that party is there to support candidates, not the candidates are there to support the party. First and
Yeah,
foremost, free
and that
men.
changed really around the time of the Obama administration. Like Bill Clinton was like the maybe to start that transition because he started placing his people in charge of the DNC, and then
Yes.
Obama was so popular. So originally Hillary was supposed to be like the lead fundraiser for the DNC, but then Obama was so popular, Howard Dean wouldn't allow him like to lose, like if, unfairly. They were basically like, look, we're taking the super delegates out of play because Hillary was trying to win on superdelegates. And Howard Dean was like, no, we're not doing this because if he's this popular that we can win back the House, win back the Senate, win the Supreme Court, win the White House, and then do it twice, then you're going to mess up everybody's money. So once again, it didn't seem like it back then, but if with hindsight, we can see even then, but Obama was there to benefit the party. Because look who we put in charge: DLC number 1, Joe Biden; DLC number 2, Hillary Clinton. They were running everything. And then you fast forward, and what did they say? What was the Hillary Victory Fund all about? The Democratic Party was fucking broke. And they needed and I'm like, okay, did Hillary help y'all? Because y'all blew through $1 billion. What the fuck do you mean? She was unpopular and you blew through $1 billion. Like, so it seemed like you spent more money than you had to begin with. And then
Was that
whatever
when
money she raised.
was that when she lost the first time or the second time?
Second time she blew through $1 billion.
Okay, all right. Evidently it was more expensive to lose that one. I don't know, but it still is not.
It's crazy when it becomes more expensive to lose, and you weren't even.
Well, if you're a mercenary,
closer.
If you're a mercenary, you don't care whether you win or lose. Makes no difference. You just show up and get paid.
She's a sociopath. That's different. She's not a She's not a mercenary because she was invested in that particular DNC. So that's why when Tulsi left, it was personal. Like, isn't that weird, right? Like, why is Tulsi leaving her position as the vice chairwoman of the DNC so personal for Hillary Clinton and her flunkies? Because that was her baby.
This is another on the purity test that I don't understand. The Council of Foreign Relations, and we don't have time to go into it on this show.
That's a whole different,
And they're not the good guys. But by the same token, you want your person who's being groomed to be president to have that communications with those people. They run the world. Yeah. So when you hear people say, right now, they're like, well, she's a member of CFR. Well, yes. There you go.
They don't like her anymore.
Till they busted her out. At which point, a bad move, guys. It
was a bad move. Well, it was a bad move for on their behalf because I think that Tulsi is going to be one of the. No, technically she is. She actually literally just got back from a conference a couple of months ago for the most powerful women in the world. She's already there. I mean, when you're brokering, she got Assad to agree to once ISIS was defeated in the region, which also I think is part of the reason why we will not allow ISIS to be defeated in the region. He said that they'll hold an open election. I want to say that he actually agreed to step down and let 2 other candidates come up. Because right now he's the only one that they trust to not bend to the U.S. empire, right? But if ISIS is defeated, then he said that he'll be more willing to have internationally watched democratic election. Not saying that it wasn't democratic before. I can't say one way or the other. But he said he's just more open to talking to other countries about how to make sure that everybody is satisfied. And for her to be able to do that with the leader who has nothing but distrust and disdain for the United States and our leaders for obvious reasons, right? She is one of the most powerful women in the world. And regardless of whether or not the CFR is there to help her achieve whatever goal she will achieve, she's going to do it. Like, it's just, that's just who she is.
Yes. Unless they kill her, and then they're going to have to deal with the reaction that they get from that. Because
I don't think it would be smart. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I don't think they're going to get away with that as easy as back in the good old days from their point of view.
Oh no, no, it's too much.
For one thing, we know where they live.
Easy to track people now.
There you go.
That bullet, boy, you can find their sperm and their DNA on a bullet they shot out. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can figure out who made the bullet, what name their baby was. Like, it's with Q or not QAnon. That's fake people. The anonymous and that, you know, you have way too much, and it would just backlash in the day. Oh man, I hate bringing this up right now. But even with Kobe Bryant passing away, right? The man is now they're thinking about changing the logo, the NBA logo for Kobe, because they didn't realize how much he really meant. They appreciated him, right? They love him, but they didn't realize just how much he meant.
I find it surprising too.
A lot of it he got eclipsed by LeBron, but brand wise, but Kobe was actually better the whole time. I'm not going to say that's metaphorical or analogous for anything that's happening right now, but it is what it is. My point is, some people don't get appreciated fully until after they're gone. In the age of social media, it's wildfire. You would be literally playing with fire to do something that's stupid. And I think to a degree, and I think you would agree, the deep state knows it. And that's part of the reason why some of our progressives are still here. Because they're like, man, we end up making a martyr out of this person, we're screwed, because you can't control it at that point. They've realized with Trump, they could control Trump, but before that, before they realized that they could control Trump, they thought that they could control outcomes. They wanted Hillary Clinton to win, and even despite all their grandest efforts, it did not happen. No. One of the only reasons I still have faith in democracy, crazy enough, but I agree 100%. It would be dumb to do anything. Put them in
so back to why it's easier being a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to? I'm seeing a lot of people talking about don't want to be a Republican or a Democrat. I don't really care what it's labeled. Again, that's just a label. It's just there to support candidates. Okay. I'm not emotionally tied into it, other than it's just a mechanism to get money to the people, to communicate for people, to put volunteers where they need to be for people. So I've kind of lost where I was going with that.
You said, so it's easy, but it's easier that you feel like to be a liberal rather than progressive because
because I'm getting old and forgetful and I can't keep a train of thought, evidently. I
imagine it's less convolution. You don't have to define.
Yeah, that's it.
What progress is.
And I can't keep it.
Discover their own progress. Their own autonomy.
I just was looking at somebody who was told they were making a big stink out of it with Mayo Pete, that his answer wasn't. They can't even agree on what his answer was, and I think it's on tape. But they're basically saying
some shit about the pulleys and levers of America.
There are pro-choice Democrats, and there are pro-life Democrats. Once again, we've got, if you're looking for a perfect purity test, this ain't liberal. It ain't worthy of free men. And what they were dealing with this one was, you aren't even allowed in the party if you are. There is no place in the party, and I'm paraphrasing here. There is no place in the party for a pro-life Democrat. That's insane. You want to talk about pro-life? How many people did we kill in Iraq?
That most of the Democrats were quote unquote pro-life.
Let's stop the war. Let's stop the war. How much pro-life can we do if we stop bombing them?
You got Joe Biden screaming, we got to cut Social Security.
Yes, and by the
that
way,
check, though, that Social Security paid for them damn dentures that you got in your damn mouth and all that extra hair. But Joe Biden got more hair now than what he had 15, 20 years ago. Okay, I know that check paying for it, Joe. Don't try to play me.
I don't have insurance right now, so please don't cut Social Security for the next 3 years because I'm coming apart. My warranty is up, y'all.
I don't think that. I think it's going to be okay. I think that Social Security is going to be fine because
I don't think it will be unless we make it that way. And I really don't see people getting it together yet. Got to look through here and don't believe what they tell you to believe. Believe what you think. What do you think? Is it worthy of free people or not?
I think that one of the good thing about Biden's little dumbass missteps when it comes to, his gaps when it comes to Social Security is that it's finally back in the forefront of conversation because for a long time it had been moved to the background, right? So when we have him messing up and almost lightheartedly to a degree, like he was like bragging about how he was just, I was willing to do the hard thing and cut Social Security. And everybody like, hold up, skirt, what the hell? That's nobody. I'm 31 years old. I hope that I will be perfectly fine and secure by the time I'm 50, 60 years old.
I was hoping that too.
Even if I am, I don't give a damn. I still want my Social Security check. I can use that money, man. I put in the work for my damn money and I won't.
That's exactly it. That isn't their money. That is your money. You put that money in there. That is, and the big lie about entitlement. It's like, yes, the person who has put it in there is who's entitled.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, you are. Yeah, that's the whole point here. Where do they even more labels, more rules?
Benefits, motherfucker. No. It's an entitlement. I'm entitled. And to be honest with you, the way I wish Social Security was actually done was that it was so you still get it taken out of your paycheck. But I wish that it was actually put into a bank account, like I guess it would be a trust. No, not a trust.
It was supposed to have been.
Oh my goodness gracious! What is it called?
It was supposed to have been.
I think it is a trust. It's called a trust when you can't touch it, basically.
Yes, and it was supposed to have been. Didn't Tulsi just come out with a position on that one? Quietly.
We talked about that, so I wouldn't be surprised. But we both agree that, so I have Navy Federal Credit Union. As long as I have Navy Federal Credit Union, my Social Security should go here. Now, if I decide to switch banks, then there would obviously be a process, right? I need to give Navy Federal permission, and they need to know it is going to a secure bank, and then that money, without me being able to touch it, will be transferred from that bank to the next bank. It is not that fucking complicated. People do it every damn day, right? And
now, would it have been nice?
I know Ronald Reagan can't dip into my shit.
Bingo. And in a perfect world, then we've got the libertarians who came out of classical liberalism, but they came out when they're talking about, they should have just never trusted the government in the first place. Hey, I didn't get a vote in 1933 when they came up with this one. They were trying to get out of that depression. And we aren't going to fix it by killing off a bunch of people in this depression.
And admittedly enough, so the original plan for Social Security, I get it, right?
I do too.
It would have been much more difficult to do what I'm saying right now back in the 40s, okay?
30s.
Oh, yeah.
Even 30s.
True, earlier than that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, shit. Literally, they couldn't even keep the stock market together with the bank.
Yeah.
So, like, your money could have been gone.
Put the banks back together, for God's sake. The banks come unglued.
But what's
in
crazy
33.
about this idea of Social Security, like just what we were just discussing before we go, is that could you imagine how many small or public banks or local banks could develop and have become legitimate competition for the mega banks if they knew they had trusts of Social Security accounts? Like credit unions do, basically, because the credit unions basically pull money. So, and that's why they always have the money available. And so if you have that type of situation going on with a bunch of different banks, then 3 banks going under doesn't fuck the entire economy.
And if it isn't theft, it doesn't, because that's not what banks are for. And they go back hundreds of years, thousands of years. That is part of classical economics. That is part of, there are laws to how money moves. Yeah. And you can't change those laws just by saying, I'm Karl Marx and I say it doesn't work that way. Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Doesn't. work that
Capitalism,
way.
their entire logic starts with, well, resources are scarce. That's a whole lie. That's a lie.
Yes, it is. As a space program guy, yes. And again, that one should have become obsolete with Malthus, that guy that was saying, well, there's only one Earth and there's always more people. Bzzzt, hit the buzzer.
Man,
we hit
yeah,
our
right. Boy, he was fucking wrong.
Every single time. He went through 4 editions wrong that he had to keep fixing all the way back there. And I was there when they launched the moonshot, that the European Space Agency considers Earth Moon to be a binary system. Let me get off in astro land here. It's not Earth, it is Earths, plural. Wait, it's already there. When you hear people talking about, but that's money wasted on space, that's like saying that's money wasted.
Yeah. Basically, because it's believed that the moon at least partially came from Earth.
Yeah. And
which means there's going to be
right now there are guys in Luxembourg figuring out how do we mine that asteroid that's full of fill in the blank. Literally there is a mountain. Yes, need. We're beyond want. We want to fix this mess back here. We need the resources from the other half of our planet, which is the moon.
Here's where it should get scary though. So basically, you start fucking with the moon too much though, then what happens to our gravitational situation, like the oceans and situations like that? So now it's a whole different. Now I don't know. I can't.
That's so many. That's so many orders of magnitude out of difference. I understand what you're saying. I had this argument.
It could be good. It could be bad, right? So we don't know. Like, so when waves create friction, because my best friend's a climate scientist, when waves create friction and things like that, shit gets bad fast. With less gravitational pull, you have more stability, right? And I mean, I know we think that, oh man, this moon just supposed to be here, right? And it's supposed to be here in this size, and that's a great thing. We don't know if the damn moon is leeching off of us for whatever. Right?
No, but let's get out of this. Is ancient history, because we got to the moon in 1969. I was a 12-year-old kid. Now we do still have to go through the people who have decided, oh, they faked the whole thing. Yeah, right, whatever. Look at
what I do think happened potentially was that some film got burned up, and I believe that at some point they would I put it past the government because of how egotistical the government is, and it was basically to prove that we could do it before Russia. Like, would I put it past the government to make a big ass fucking Hollywood production out of it because shit didn't turn out like film wise? Because listen, we live in 2020. Me and fucking Terry spent 20 minutes getting my equipment together. Okay, so I know goddamn well that y'all were not adequately prepared to film that.
Take a look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, and that's 1969 technology. If they faked it, they wouldn't fake it as well as they did with Stanley Kubrick. He had the state-of-the-art stuff, and it doesn't look right. We know for a fact it just doesn't look right. Go back and watch 2001. It looks like Wally the Robot or something,
Exactly. So that's the only logical argument you can give for faking it. But
and it's ancient history again.
With Russia they would be able, which people don't even consider. I'm like, y'all do know Russia could literally probably track every single thing we were doing from the time we got there to the time we got back.
Yes.
Like they would know if we were bullshitting. They had satellites up there. They would literally know if we were bullshitting.
Yes, and they could send one back and check on it. Eventually, we're going to finally get past this one because it's going to be a tourist destination. Yeah. There's going to be a bubble thrown up over the top of Tranquility Base. And do I want to see that? Oh, yeah. I'm turned white hair waiting to be able to get off this planet for a visit. I mean, I'm telling you, yes, I want to see that. I want to be able to see the next flat earther after that and tell him, sorry, man, I went there. Okay.
Interestingly enough, I don't think that it'll be well, maybe it will be a bubble, but I think it will actually be, at a certain point, we'll be able to create an actual atmosphere on the moon. Yeah. I do believe that because the atmosphere is made up of just, different gases and shit. Like we can literally create an atmosphere locally if we want
you can. And it's keep on moving. Again, that's ancient history. That's 1969. We should have been, they used to say L5 by 95. L5 is the thing in 2001 Space Program, Space Odyssey. The big space station out there with Hilton in the background that is what they were doing, private enterprise in space all the way back there in '69. That's what they were showing you. Was they didn't go to a NASA facility. They went to the Hilton because Hilton knows more about keeping people overnight and keeping them from getting crabby than anybody else at that point.
True. All right, now we don't went like literally way out of.
Yes,
way out of literally in outer space. But so I want to wrap it up.
It is a part of classical economics. You got to be able to grow. You can't.
Yes, you got to allow people to be able to grow too. Cannot stop potential. Free
men can grow.
If someone does not reach their potential, that's a whole different discussion. But if you are purposely stunting your potential for growth, which I truly believe, like I said, resources aren't scarce. So even starting out with that claim, you're like, oh, we can only divvy up, resources at this price because there isn't that much of this particular item, which is a whole lot. We actually, so there's, obviously people think that they call oil fossil fuel. Okay, so I just want to be as perfectly clear as possible about this. We have no fucking idea how the hell oil got here. We don't know how much of it is in the planet. We don't know if the planet's literally making that shit every goddamn day. They have been talking about us running out of oil since oil was discovered. We do not know, okay?
Titan. We do know that Titan's entire atmosphere is hydrocarbons. So if we go on out past the moon, out past Jupiter, Saturn, somewhere in the neighborhood over there, and pull a right and start sucking the atmosphere off of that moon called Titan, it's oil. So it's like, hydrocarbons, oil.
So it's people what they mean when they say resources are scarce. They say we only have so many tanks and guns to go take other people's resources so they can't compete with us. That's what.
And that's not capitalism. That's mercantilism. Each of these words, I'm hoping people will get curious and go back and look, because there's a universe in every one of these words that we've been taught to not think about.
That's true.
We're not supposed to think about this.
You got to kind of know where we came from and why they decided to change these definitions and assign their own, connotations. Like, I mean, even Stalin completely fucking corrupted the phrase communism because of how popular the word communism was, and the idea of just making sure that the people were taken care of and that the people own the means of production and control that. That was a great, they thought they were getting something that they definitely did not get. Talk about being sold a fucking bad, a bad bill of goods, man. That shit was.
But he did get rid of the Germans.
Oh yeah, they kicked ass, bro. They
can pull a war off. So and Wall Street paid for both of them and FDR.
And that's
so there's another set of books. Different. Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, we've talked about that a lot.
Hopefully we can get people to just think in terms of, that's what my whole hope here is.
This topic is, thanks for the super chat. Donna said this topic is so much better than the title suggested. Yeah, I mean, that tends to happen with me.
Sorry about that. I'm boring. I'm a history guy. What can I tell you?
Definitely these people are used to it, because I'm like, how I am. Most of our conversations, history. Terry's giving me history lessons, and I'm giving him political history lessons.
Yes, and that's how we get through this mess. Is because I didn't have time to study it. Like you said, you speak Portuguese even.
Yes.
Like we didn't even cover Brazil history with my world history back in the day.
Lord,
we have made some progress here. Okay.
Learning literally
progressive history.
Because to get a minor in Portuguese, you have to take at least 5 or 6 levels of Portuguese. I can't remember how much I took, but
that's incredible.
One of the classes you could take is like the political history of Brazil, and it's all in Portuguese. And what you learn, what I learned, because I'm like a big poli-sci guy, and I was comparative politics, which is like international relations. Literally, I was trying to understand, and I kept asking my professor. I was like, okay, so how did y'all have the exact same ethnic makeup? You went through almost the exact same thing with slavery. They ended a little bit later, okay, granted, but y'all have better weather, way more. They have more resources than the United States does. They have potentially, they could have had better tourism than the US does. They even, I would argue, had more quote unquote culture. At least they could have had more culture until things happen. And I'm like, but yet they keep going through an economic depression almost like every other day. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like their inflation goes like this and goes like that, and then I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And at this point, I would consider myself still young. I know it's crazy because felt like I knew a lot at that point.
I would consider you to be young.
Again,
Yes.
I didn't realize how much we influence other governments and other. I didn't know that we were literally destroying Brazil's economy every chance we get. And I'm like, why would we do that? Oh, probably because of everything I just said. Because they do have the agriculture, they do have the tourism, they have even better weather, they have all the culture, they have the exact ethnic makeup. You know, with all the experiences of all these different countries, we could have made them a great and stable nation. But then you become competition for the United States, don't you?
They already were a great and stable country. That's what also we're just picking up, and that's a whole nother show. But part of what they're picked up, 1491 is a real good book to read. Hard to read, but worth it. And they're saying they made that Amazon soil, Loma Prieta, I think.
Really?
No, that's not right. That Black Earth.
Wow, I didn't
yeah,
know
look up Black Earth, and it's just now being found out in the last couple of years. It's also a big hot on how to get carbon out of the atmosphere. Don't get me started on that.
Wow.
But if you burn it and put it in the ground, it'll stay there for about 1,000 years. So you want to get rid of some carbon.
Oh my goodness.
And they were doing this thousands of years ago.
That's crazy.
There were multiple times more people than they are saying.
That's crazy.
It's
also scary as shit because that means they murdered the hell out of a lot of people.
Well, it wasn't so much that as they didn't have exposure to the disease. So, and there wasn't as much intent there as it would look like for the actual. They were dead before the Europeans got to them. I'm thinking more and more.
Got to them?
All of our diseases, and that's from guns, germs, and steel.
That makes sense because
it was all empty, and that was where they came up with that fiction about Doctrine of Discovery, which was why Brazil speaks Portuguese, everybody else speaks Spanish, because the Pope came up with a rule and said, this side of the line Portuguese, this side of the line Spanish. So we're going to run out of. Yeah, but man. Please think in terms of free.
But you do gotta wonder, just with Brazil. I was wondering why the Amazons were so it just was fruitful, right? Agriculture.
They're finding civilizations all over the place underneath that canopy they didn't have the technology. And this one's Eurocentric history. I didn't study Portuguese, but I should have. It says I've got a degree in world history. I don't know squat about world history. I know white people real quick, right? white people history. I know that, but we weren't taught the whole rest of it, and it's just now beginning to come out how much more of it there is. The Iroquois, who are one of the 3 oldest continually operating democracies on the planet. That's incredible.
And we told them, oh man, if you had a government, we won't harm you. As long as you have a government, it's fine. And then we realized, you know what? Actually, we really don't want you to have a government. We need you to be savages. We lie. You hear the lies that we tell. I mean, we do not do this about people overseas.
That's going to be another long show.
They're savages.
Are we getting any comments? Is anybody even remotely interested in what we're talking about, or are we just talking to ourselves?
Somebody actually said that the conversation that we had is actually better than what the title suggested. So,
okay. Well, I hope we do. That's really what this is all about. Is hopefully we've got people thinking. Hopefully we got people thinking. Period.
Question what you know, and always look to learn more.
And keep your balance. Still your line.
Speaking of which, people. Always remember more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.